We also wanted to very quickly do a little commercial for our community of practice. This is a website that we created during the national conference in June, with the idea of allowing, the community of teachers and learners that we are a part of to have a place to continue the conversations between these events that we have. So I'm going to share in the chat a link in just a moment, but before I do, allow me to just share what this website looks like. When you sign up to become a member of the community of practice, you're going to have access to 2 video libraries. So the video libraries of all of our previous PD talks, including the one that we'll have today. It'll be up by Monday, so you could check that out again. And also the video library from our National Conference for Teachers of English that we had in June. And we have 24 sessions that are all recorded there, including one of the sessions that Betsy Parrish, our speaker today, gave us. In addition to that, we have a discussion forum here with some questions that Betsy wrote for you. So this will also be a great place for you to come after the session or sometime this weekend to share some ideas related to the content of this talk. So just for you to see, this is the video library. We have here the recording from Dr. Keith Foltz's PD talk 2 weeks ago. So if you haven't checked it out, you can come see that again. And as I said, Betsy's session from June, rigor from the get-go. If you like what you see today, I know you're going to enjoy her recording from June as well. So let me just go back to my presentation here, and I think it's time for us to get started. So let me introduce Betsy. Betsy Parrish is professor in the MA TESOL and TEFL certificate programs at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. She's worked as a language teacher, teacher educator, writer, and a consultant for over 30 years. And she has experience in the United States, in Bangladesh, France, India, Russia, and Vietnam. She's participated in the development of state and national standards, focusing on college and career readiness. Her research centers around instruction that prepares English learners for success in
Mark, you're muted.
Have I been muted for
No, just
minutes?
for about 10 seconds.
Okay. Someone muted me. It wasn't me, I swear. So I don't know where I left off, but she has, has extensive experience, and she's also published several books. Her most recent book is Teaching Adult English Language Learners, A Practical Introduction, and that's from Cambridge University Press. And it addresses the diverse needs of adult English learners and provides ideas on how to prepare all learners for the demands of the 21st century. So I think that's very similar to what she's going to be presenting us today. And so her session is called Differentiation by Design, Optimizing Learning for All. So please, everyone, welcome Betsy Parrish.
Thank you all.
Let me stop sharing for you to share, Betsy.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Mark. I'm so excited to be back. I enjoyed my session with you all in June, and also I've had the opportunity to collaborate with Lily here at the center with students from my program visiting classes in Costa Rica. So we've had some great collaborations and really excited to be here. So I'm based in St. Paul, Minnesota, where we already have snow on the ground. It's a little earlier than usual, but we already have snow on the ground. And this is a topic that really is near and dear to my heart, because Minnesota really serves very diverse learner populations. My work is in the area of adult education, and we serve more refugees per capita in Minnesota than any other state in the United States. And also we have over 150 home languages in the families in Minnesota. So it's a highly diverse state, population, linguistically diverse. So we've always been working with teachers on how can we make sure that the work we're doing is meeting the needs of such diverse language, cultural backgrounds and educational backgrounds. So our objectives for today are, hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be able to articulate dimensions of a multi-level classroom. And I think articulate it in new ways that maybe you hadn't really thought about before. We're going to think about 3 dimensions of differentiation using a well-known model that's often used in the United States and around the world in K-12 education, teaching content like math or history or language arts. And we're going to apply the process to teaching English as an additional language, as a second language. So we're going to look at how to differentiate the content, the topics we teach, the processes we use as teachers, and then the products means the sorts of assessments or the artifacts of learning that we ask students to create. And then finally, while we're not going to develop activities in this workshop ourselves, or you're not going to have a chance to actually develop activities, I hope you'll leave with ideas about how you could differentiate what you do with classroom tasks. So we will end with a workshop time where you're going to reflect on what you learned about today and think about some action steps and maybe commit to some action steps that you'll take for helping learners in your context. So we're going to do a short poll. And you'll just choose all that apply. Do you teach primarily primary level students, secondary level, adults, mostly online, mostly face-to-face, a combination of the two, or a multi-level class? So you can select all that apply. Please go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now in your teaching. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we've got combination. So what I can see so far, and we'll share the results. Mostly, well, we have more people teaching adults than others, okay? About 65% teaching adults, about a quarter who teach at the secondary level. And it looks like you're most of you are teaching mostly online right now. All right, so let's stop. Oh, I'll see if I can share it from my view here. Okay, let's see if we can see the results. Can you see the results as participants? Awesome, great. All right, so again, mostly adults, but we've got a nice mix here. And it looks like mostly online right now. So what I'll talk about today, I want to say right away that the activities I'm going to demonstrate with you, I'm going to do them considering how to do it in an online format, okay? However, everything we talk about, you could do the same thing in a face-to-face classroom. But I don't think it makes sense to only talk about face-to-face right now in our current context. Now, what I noticed is only about 20% of you said that you teach multi-level classes, okay? And I want to see, maybe your thoughts might change after our next poll. So Mark, if you could launch our next poll. And we're going to think about, for the learners in your classes, okay, which of these statements are true? They have different expectations about teaching and learning. They have different comfort levels with virtual and digital tools. They have different levels of literacy or oral proficiency, different access to English outside of class, different personalities and ways of being in the world, and different motivations for learning English. Okay, so which of those are true for learners that you serve? Please check all that apply. This one takes a little bit more time to think about, doesn't it? A little bit more, more reading to do and reflection. All right. Give you another, we'll take about another 20 seconds. So I'm noticing, I mean, there's a fair number of people for all of these statements, right? At least, 40% for the lowest access to English, and otherwise, like 80% of you are saying their motivations for learning English are different, right? Okay. All right, so let's share, and we'll share the results. All right. All right, so now, if you look at our results here, and if we can start thinking about multi-level, including these different kinds of factors, now I'm going to ask you the question from the earlier poll one more time, and I want you to answer in the chat, yes or no. Do you teach a multi-level class? If you start to define multi-level in terms of personal situation, ability to use digital literacy tools, Let's see. Yes, 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 yes. Lots of yeses, right? Okay. Okay, absolutely. Right. Okay, great, great. All right. So now, thank you so much. We can go ahead and close that poll. So let's look at what multi-level really means. And just so you know, so you don't need to worry about taking a lot of notes right now, you'll have this on the first page of that handout that we're sharing with you in the chat. So what makes a class multi-level? Well, it's differing proficiency levels, right? Sometimes you have some students who are very proficient with their oral language and not so much with literacy, or vice versa, right? Also, you could have students with very different experiences with education. This is going to be less true when you're teaching English in your own country and you're teaching English as a foreign language or as a subject area, or you could be doing content-based instruction. But if you're working with learners who are all residing in the same country, this will be less of a variable. Where I teach, learners come with very different experiences with education. And they also come with very different cultural backgrounds. But if we define culture more broadly, culture is not monolithic. And within any of our cultures, there are many subcultures. Every group of students is going to bring different beliefs, values, practices. Of course, it's more extreme in the situation that I'm in, teaching English, where I might have students from 20 different places in the same classroom, or I noticed there was someone here from Oregon in the same situation, right? Different individual factors, okay? So situational factors, stressors in their lives, especially right now with COVID-19 and the pandemic, there are a lot of people who've experienced job loss. People are having to school their children at home while they're working online and then studying English at the same time. So those individual factors can really come into play. And situational, individual and situational. So like I said, these factors are shown with lots and lots of examples and details on page 1 of your handout, okay? So given that in my mind, I personally believe that every class, every group of learners, regardless of age, level, content area, every group of learners is a multi-level group, because we all are different individuals and we all have different ways of being, knowing, doing, thinking about learning. So what can we do? We can think about content, the content that we teach, the processes that we use, and I'll go into each of these in turn in a little bit here, and the products that we have students create. So Tomlinson and Imbo are the folks that have proposed this model, Tomlinson in particular. And I think this is more timely than ever, because now that we're teaching online in a virtual classroom, it's harder to kind of read our students. If you think about it, if you're teaching face-to-face, you're walking around the room, you can kind of see from students' body language how they're doing. You can see from their facial expressions, and they're going to call you over. Well, now, we're leaving students to their own devices in breakout rooms. It's a lot different. So to me, this is actually more imperative than ever. However, I think it's harder than ever to know how to do this, I think, because you can't get to know your students as quickly. All right, so we'll be thinking about that. So content, meaning the content of what the learners need to know and understand in your lessons. And that could be the content as in economics, numeracy, but it's also the language learners need to be successful in any lesson or unit. So that's the content. And so let's just look just quickly at a couple ways we could differentiate. For example, we could vary the level and complexity of the content, with some students learning something at more of a novice level, and some students learning more at an expert level, depending on their own background. So have you ever had, let's say you're doing a unit on the environment, and you have a student in your class who's a student whose major is environmental studies. Of course, they bring more content knowledge in their home language to the table than the person who's majoring in math, right? So we can change the complexity of the content. We can change the complexity of the texts that we provide. And that's, think about level of language, but also infographics, where we have a visual, we have tables, diagrams, different colors of font. We usually have bulleted language. Infographics can actually be a lot easier for English learners to understand, because the the text itself has a lot of scaffolds or supports built into it. So maybe if you're looking at a particular topic, some students look at an infographic while other students are reading an article. Also, don't forget to vary the modality. So I love to use things like short video clips, news reports, like, very short on the topic of the day, whatever it is we're studying, or podcasts, all sorts of modalities, as well as then reading. So if you want to get input, you could use different modalities to have students explore the same topics, right? And then finally, giving students some choice, letting them make some choices about what they want to explore within a larger theme. And then we're going to talk today about how do we vary our curriculum, our instructional approaches depending on our learners' needs. So this is about how we teach, the instructional decisions that we make. For example, maybe we vary the complexity of the tasks that we give. So some students, when they're asked to do a written assignment, maybe some students are just assigned to write a paragraph and others something longer, or some are given more supports for that. What about the complexity could be, like if you're doing a role play, some students have a scripted dialogue or role play, and some students just have a prompt and they have to build the role play themselves. We can also provide more or less fewer scaffolds, supports or scaffolding. For example, some students might read a text and then answer questions, but others might read and fill in a graphic organizer. It's actually, and maybe they need practice with note taking and ideas on how to organize ideas. So we can have different students use different tools. It's okay, right? And then we can also assign different roles and responsibilities in the class, where some students are guides, facilitators, teachers themselves, helping others. Especially now, aren't you finding that your students themselves are the best problem solvers in this online environment than anybody? I'm teaching my courses on Zoom on Monday afternoons for 3 hours, and people help me. They tell me, Betsy, we don't see your slides right now, or Betsy, you could try this. I learn a lot. We'll learn a lot from students ourselves, don't we? And these are teacher students, not English language learner students, but I think the same is true in all classrooms. And then the last thing we want to think about is varying the products or the learning, how we have learners demonstrate understanding of their learning targets. So we may, sometimes maybe you've usually had students write an essay. Well, why don't you have them make a presentation instead, or have them do a poster, or have them create a podcast, for example. Now, you could use the same rubric to assess all of these products, can't you? For example, oops, I have a little, that's okay. You can vary the complexity. Like if you're doing, let's say you've asked them to do a PowerPoint presentation or a Google slide presentation, maybe you vary the number of slides or the amount of language you expect, or the quantity and the depth of responses in their responses. It's okay. Everybody could meet objectives to a different point. And then also the modality. So some students might write a report, some might make a graphic presentation or representation of what they've learned about, and others might do a recording or a little video on their phones that they send to you to share what they learned, okay? All right. Now, so then how do you decide what to do? Well, you base it on readiness. So that's how learners, how well they are prepared for the content. Like I said, they may come in with different previous degrees in different different content areas, but it's also the language demands of your tasks that you have to think about. What about their interests? What content and knowledge and skills are they most interested in? And then by extension, might motivate them more, right? And then finally, what are their learning profiles? So how do they approach learning? What might their preferences or cultural expectations be about teaching and learning, and the different roles among teachers and students? Okay, so now, whoops, my thing isn't clicking. Let me go backwards, maybe it'll go forward now. There we go. All right, okay. Is this how you're feeling right now? How many of you are feeling like that right now? If you go to the participant, if you click on the participant window, you should be able to put a yes or a no. How are you feeling? You're thinking, how can I do all this? Okay. What do you think? Or not? Well, Oftentimes that's the reaction when I talk about differentiation and I talk about these different components. People sort of think, well, I don't know, how could I do all that, especially now? So the idea here is that you could never differentiate all of these elements in every lesson. And I wouldn't expect that. I know I can't do that. You couldn't possibly do that. But the purpose of this workshop is to think about being intentional. And that's why I called it differentiation by design. Being really intentional about these elements of content, process, and products, and then differentiate by design based on the successes you've seen learners having in the past, as well as things that you know they need more work on and have struggled with. So, you know, you want to move away from sort of one size fits all activities. You want activities that have enough and tasks and lessons that have enough entry points and options to support these different learner outcomes. That is really part of the principles of being inclusive and inclusivity and culturally responsive teaching as well, is that we have multiple ways for people to demonstrate their learning with different varieties of English and kind of, like I said, different ways of being and knowing in the world. Okay, so now, if you had your hand, you don't need to have your handout in hand, but I just want to reassure you, you do have these samples that are coming up now in your handout. And if you want, Mark, you can just share that URL again. So we're going to start off with a task, a sample task that you might do in one of your classes. Okay. Now, so let's just read through this quickly. So you're going to present the pros and the cons of starting a small business in your community, and you're going to state your pros and cons and present about it based on evidence that you gather through some research. So the first step is that you look at these 3 types of businesses and kind of think about what kind of skills and expertise do you have, and would you need to develop a restaurant, a food truck, or a small market. So this sample is something that's part of a curriculum on career explorations. We do a lot of work in that area with newcomers to the United States, and that's my context, okay? In a moment here, I'm going to have you think about how you could apply all of these steps with whatever content is of interest to you personally in your context with your learners. So learners are going to choose which of these do they want to explore, and they'll start to do some online research in teams, looking at the targeted neighborhoods. Maybe are there similar small businesses in that area? Are there spaces available, and how much does it cost to rent or to lease in that area? What does it cost to buy a food truck? But ultimately, learners are going to create a presentation of the pros and the cons of starting a business for their targeted area, and they're going to present that as a PowerPoint or a poster presentation to their classmates. Now that's the task. And imagine if you found that task in your textbook, okay? Some of you are probably thinking, well, I would never have anything like that in my textbook for elementary students or secondary students. Maybe in your college or adult classrooms, you might have something like this. That's okay. But I want you to think about, so as we move forward with this demonstration, I want you to think about, well, what if I was doing a different topic? For example, you could do all of these steps, but instead of those photographs of restaurant, food truck, small market, it could be choosing a travel destination, right? Choosing a travel destination. Could be, if you were working with high school students, it could be choosing a major for university. What do I want to major in? What do I want to study? Okay. Or maybe if you're working with adults and their parents, it could be about choosing an after-school activity for your kids. So we're going to do a little interacting right now. I'd like you to go to the chat and imagine if you were going to do this kind of a problem. It's like a problem solving activity, right? That you might use in your curriculum. What are some topics that you could use equally well for the same task? Let's just share some ideas before we continue. I'm going to demonstrate then how we can differentiate the content, process, and products in any kind of problem-solving activity like this one. So let's see what we have in the chat so far. So vacation destinations, nice. What else? How to contribute to my community, lovely, nice. How do what's my charitable giving? Party planning. This is great. Let's hear some more ideas. My daily routines, sure. And making decisions, like for that one, like which of these activities am I going to do this weekend? What events do I want to, oh, what about planning for Thanksgiving dinner? Sure. Who's going to bring what and why? And you might do your research by looking at the different websites for the supermarkets in the area and looking where they have good deals and what you're going to buy. Visiting national parks, types of tourism. Great. Okay. A pet daycare. I love it. So, all right. So are you all with me? Any questions? So this is a problem-solving activity that I'll walk us through to demonstrate the process of differentiation. But in your head, you can be thinking of any content, any topic. Okay. All right. Reducing the carbon footprint. Excellent. Great. All right. So now, the first thing we want to do is consider the task demands. By task demands, and I mean, what are the topics for this particular version of it? You have to understand the idea of entrepreneurship, right? You have to have some understanding of small businesses, what that means exactly. You also have to have some language. You need to have the language functions like asking for and giving opinions, making suggestions, describing options, and stating preferences, right? So there are a lot of language functions that you need to be successful with this activity. There are a lot of language forms that you need, like modals, we could, we can, or we should for advisability. You have some vocabulary like renting versus leasing, competition, availability, and then a lot of critical thinking skills like evaluating the reliability of a web page, analyzing options, identifying and evaluating pros and cons. Now, I'll tell you, rest assured, I have a sort of an answer key for you for this on page 2. So don't worry if you haven't caught every detail of what I just said about language function, language forms, and critical thinking. Those are on page 2. I have a chart on page 2 that walks us through this system of differentiation, okay, with sort of my answer key for you. The next one is process, okay? So we have to think about how comfortable are students with the digital literacy tools? Well, now that we're teaching online so much, we can demonstrate this with them. We can go to a different website. We can show them how to do a web search to look for the information they need. We can listen to, let's see, yeah, that's really all I want to say there. Is like really make sure they know how to do the web search. That's a big part from the instructional side of things. The other thing though is we could make sure that they're interested in this topic, and we could give them the option of thinking of other options, okay? But there are some demands here. And we think about the linguistic demands of the task. It does take a lot of digital literacy and comfort with presenting to others at the end. And then the other demand is, how do I create a poster? How do I create a PowerPoint to present my findings? And how comfortable am I doing that with others? So those are some of the task demands. In other words, what learners need to be able to do to be successful. So with that, now let's walk through the different steps we could take to differentiate so we can reach more people, okay? So the first thing we want to think about, how can we vary the content? Again, we could vary for the level, we could vary the sources with level appropriate language. Like we can look ahead at the different websites, make sure there are things that are accessible to students. We could also pre-teach a lot of the vocabulary work, okay? We could, let's see, I'm looking at the wrong side here. Oh, yes. So for interest, this is where I pointed this out earlier. So you can have students replace those 3 small businesses with other small businesses that they might like to do. Because if you think about what your learning outcomes for this is that you need to create a presentation, presenting pros and cons, and providing evidence to support your claims. If that's the big overarching learning objective and that's what you want to assess them on, it doesn't matter what small businesses they talk about, right? If you want to talk about travel destinations, it doesn't matter which travel destinations, you want them to practice the language and the skills for creating their presentation to show the pros and the cons of some options. And then also thinking about, you want to think about what kind of prior experience they have. Maybe they generate a list of prior small businesses. Maybe in the United States, this is from my example, if you're doing this in the US, they could read success stories of immigrants who've had success with small businesses. But if, let's say you chose travel as your theme, maybe you would share some blog posts, some inspirations for different places they might share, or different reviews about different destinations. And then you want to think about their learning profiles. So make sure that you use a variety of types of texts, like video, websites, readings as sources, that it's culturally relevant and accessible. Okay. And then we want to think about the process. We might want to teach the learners some language. They might need some specific language frames to be successful in talking about which small business they'd be interested in. They might need to have you model how to do the web search. And this might be an opportunity to really encourage translanguaging, or the idea of using your first language as a resource, because they might be able to access texts in their home language that are much richer than what they can read yet in English, but then they can use that information to create and do their other work in English and create something in English, okay? Let them create groups of their own based on their personal interests. Don't assign them to groups. And then give them supports that they need for creating their final products. So whether that's giving them different options, and also giving them tools for planning. Like if they're talking about pros and a con of a topic, make sure you give them a simple T-chart. Or if you're having them think about describing a destination, maybe give them a mind map to help them organize their ideas, okay? And then finally, we can vary the products. So learners could vary the types of product, a poster, a PowerPoint, or a video. They could contribute to the final products based on their interest and abilities. Maybe some students are really good with numbers, and so they're the ones who are going to look at the financial side of things and create graphs, and other people are much more visual and artistic, and they're going to create visual, the visual supports. And then also allow for different types of written outcomes. I think we often use an essay, but why not do an FAQ, a fact sheet, right? Frequently asked question sheet, or a tips sheet. Or like I said earlier, they could do skits that they video record, podcasts, write a short manual, or use images and video clips in their poster presentations. So again, just giving you a wide range of options. For this first example, the idea here is just to show you that with any task, there are these different dimensions, and then there are all these different options that you could then apply for your setting. So this is on page 2 in your handout. And again, just what you could apply with any topic, any content. It would not have to be the small businesses. Okay. All right. Let's see. Thanks for sharing that again. Okay, great. Now we're going to do a sample that would be appropriate with beginning. And now going forward, I'm not going to take such a deep dive into the 3 components and learner readiness, interests, and profile. That first one was intended to get kind of give you the idea, this concept of Tomlinson and Imbo's of the sort of matrix that you have: content, process, and products. You have learner readiness, interest, and profile. And like I said, even if you make one change to a lesson, one small change, you're already going to reach more learners in your class. Now, so the next one, oftentimes when we're teaching beginning level learners, we will see the theme of free time activities as a theme. So talking about free time activities, things you like to do on the weekends, or things you like to do on vacation, or in the evenings. And that's great. And usually it's simple present tense, often adverbs of frequency, right? But I want to show you, and this is kind of on the theme from this summer when I did the talk about rigor from the get-go. Let's think about how you can, with beginners, do something that's a little bit more substantive by collecting information about their classmates. So they'll do some data collection, gathering information about their classmates, and then they'll analyze the data and present the results in a report or a bar graph. Okay, but so now we're going to look at this through the lens of differentiation. One of the things that I've noticed is oftentimes often in any unit, the activities, they're not necessarily the things that interest the learners. They don't necessarily represent what they like to do. And that's true for any topic with any content with beginners. And they may not have the language. They might recognize a picture, but they don't know the words for it. So we're going to start off by having a lesson that's all based, the whole lesson is based on learner generated content. Okay, so the learners are gonna, it's through this first activity that learners are gonna share what the topics are going to be for the lesson. Now, Jamboard is a tool that I've been using more lately. Jamboard is an extension on Google. Okay, so it's a free tool, it's free, and it's very easy to use. It's very, very easy to use. So if you can take some time to teach your learners how to use Google Jamboard. Other tools would be Whiteboard in Zoom or Padlet. But the thing I like about Jamboard is it's very flexible. It's very easy to use. And we're going to practice using it here in a couple minutes. So it has the option, you can either upload a photograph, you can draw, and you can put a sticky note. And I'll show you in a moment. So to start the lesson off, I start generating some content by sharing my own example. I like to go to my cabin and I like to go to the lakeside in the summer, and I like to spend time with my family. So my pictures show me making bagels. It's a sort of roll with my son who was visiting, and I love to kayak. I love kayaking. So those are two things that I like to do in my free time. Okay, now that's with a picture. I can upload a photograph very easily. The students can upload a photograph from whatever device they are on. If they're studying on their phone, they could upload from their phone. If they're on an iPad or on their laptop, they can upload. They can also make a sticky note right here. And they would share it. This is the multi-level. The differentiation here is that some students just write one word. I like biking. They might say, I like to bike. They might say, I like bike. It doesn't matter. They're going to contribute whatever language they own. Because they're creating the content for the lesson, we know they understand it, which is what makes it so ideal for beginners. Someone said, I like swimming. I like to swim, exercise. One student might write a whole sentence. I like to read in my free time. So again, the multi-level side to this and the differentiation is that there are multiple ways that learners can enter into this activity depending on their strengths, their interests, their abilities, right? And how they like to learn. The next one is they can also draw. If you look up here, they can draw. So what do you think this is? What does this person like to do right here with the flower? Anybody in the chat? Gardening, exactly. Okay. And then this one, I mean, I made a sailboat, but this could be boating, being on a boat on the water. Okay. All right. Okay. So now using the learner generated content, we're going to create a lesson. So you might do this one day. You might do this one day in your class. Okay. And then use the content for the lesson the next day. It really would depend on how many hours you spend with your students and how flexible you are. But then we're going to use that information to create the one question survey activity. I shared this summer for those of you who are here. We did it on your environmental footprint. This time it's for beginning level students using their own topics. They're going to have just simple yes, no questions. Do you like exercising? Do you like biking? Do you like kayaking, et cetera, et cetera? So you could either create these on if you gather the information the day before, you could create like a note that you email to a student with their question. You could put it in a chat, or you could just have a list in a Google Doc and just assign one question to each student. The idea, though, is that you should give about 3 or 4 students in your class, if you have a large class, the same question. If you have a class of about 12 students, then give a pair of students the same question. Students now are going to gather data, gather information from their classmates. So this can be done by, in a smaller class, they could each take turns, open your mic in Zoom if you're on Zoom, and have them ask the question and people answer. They could use the chat. They could use a polling. If you're using polling, how many of you are using, where the learners are using polling, like Kahoot? Are your learners using some of the polls themselves, right? So they could create their polls. So there are a variety of ways that they could collect this data. Once we're back into face-to-face teaching, in my face-to-face classroom, when I use one question survey, each learner has the slip of paper with their question and they walk around the classroom. And then they end up having papers that look like this, okay? So they're gonna collect all this data and just tally. And tallying and collecting data is a really great, practice with workplace and professional skills, right? But it's topics or content that's maybe more accessible that any learner could talk about. Now, the other rule of thumb, though, is we may have to give supports and scaffolds. Remember earlier, I said you might need to give people language frames that they need to talk about the data, okay? So many people, or if your students do have the literacy level and the numeracy skills, I mean, you could teach phrases like 3/4 of the class, or half the class, or 50% of the class. So learners are going to talk in small groups now about the data they collected and share that with one another. And this is where you could put students together who had the same question so they can look at their data together. Now, what do you guess we're going to do next with the data? Go ahead and say in the chat, what do you think we're going to do with all this data? Make a graph, absolutely, right? Make a graph, right? That's exactly what I do. Okay, so I've used this activity for any number of topics. I've used this activity to talk about our environmental footprint. I've used it to talk about how I practice English outside of class. You can do it with, this is for beginners, but you could do this with longer phrases and using how often do you with like once a month, once a week with longer adverbial phrases, okay? All right, so now they're going to create a graph for those who feel able and ready, or they could write about it if they really don't feel ready to do a graph. And then some students might know how to use Google Sheets already. If they know how to do that, if they're working, if they're high school students who are doing that for their classes in their own country, or if they're adults and they use these tools for work, let them practice using it in English. Why not, right? But not all students would have access or know how to use all the tools. But the first example here, kayaking, is using maybe for those who have that skill set. And they're going to make a graph about what they learned about kayaking, okay? Now this group here on the bottom right, they don't really know how to use those tools yet. So they're just going to draw a graph using Jamboard. So you can draw a graph like this on Jamboard very easily. Or maybe they're just, I'm not ready for that, and I really want practice writing. So those students can write a short report, maybe a few sentences or maybe a paragraph. We found that most people like biking. Half the class likes cooking. So you could give them partial phrases, and then they can complete the sentences with the information they gathered. Okay, let me just pause for a moment to see if there are any questions about that step, that series of activities. So again, gather and create learner-generated content first. And I used Jamboard, but you could do that on a Google Doc. You could do that on Zoom Whiteboard. You could do that any number of ways. But the thing with Jamboard is that you can draw, you can do a sticky note, you can do a photograph, and then create one question survey questions based on their content that they generated, and then do the graphing. And with this, you're working on simple present tense, yes, no questions. You're working on graphing, you're working on data collection, analysis. So any questions before I continue on how this works? Looks great. Thank you. Good. All right. Later on, you'll have a chance to reflect during our workshop time. You'll get to reflect on what you liked here today that you might apply to your own setting. Okay. So let's just review the principles. So what was the differentiation? How did we differentiate this by design? Well, the biggest piece I would say is that it's based on learner-generated input. So therefore, the level is self-regulated by the learners themselves, okay? With the process, we're using text. Some people could write an answer on the Jamboard. Some people can draw a picture. They can share a photo. So there's mixed modalities: drawing, speaking, writing, listening to one another. We could vary our communication tools. So we can use polls. We can use the chat function. We can send them into breakout rooms to interview one another. And then we can use those sentence or paragraph frames as scaffolds. So again, the frame is where you give them something that's partially filled in, and then they complete it with their information. And Mark attended my session this summer, and he said that was something that he's tried with his students. So do you want to just say what you said earlier, Mark, about how you felt like it actually allowed them to express more of their ideas?
Yeah, so I had used sentence frames, for example, to get, or sentence starters, to get them talking, and things like that, but I had never given them a paragraph frame, right? And I honestly thought that I was doing too much and that they were just going to fill in the blank with a couple of words. I had students that wrote a full paper. These are college students, obviously, and they had more than one survey question, but it was very scientific, very professional. They were very proud of the work that they did, and I was obviously very proud of them. And so I definitely recommend the paragraph frames because it gives them an idea of how to link their ideas together.
Yeah, yes, right. And then as you all know, I mean, the ways that we write for different genres are very culturally bound. And if you're preparing students to say work, I don't know, if they're learning English because they want to work in an English speaking country in North America or in the UK, or if they're learning English to communicate and write to somebody else with that different audience, the ways of expressing oneself are so different. In English, in North America, it's very linear. You have to have your main idea and your supporting details. In other cultures, good writing is very circular. You might start off with an anecdote. You might start off, maybe you don't want to be too obvious. You don't want to treat the reader like they're stupid, and you feel like you don't have to explain everything. So each culture has different views about what a good essay looks like depending on the genre. And so paragraph frames are a really great a really great tool for helping learners navigate those different expectations. And finally, we use different tools for the product. We had, you could draw your graph on Jamboard, you could create your graph in Google Docs, you could draw, or you could write a summary, okay? So now we're gonna play with Jamboard for a moment here, all right? So, Mark, I hope I have the right, you know what I'm going to do just to make sure I have the right link. We're going to take a few minutes and let's see what time, I think, yeah, we're going to take a few minutes, not quite in breakout. We'll go in breakout rooms not too far from now, too long from now, but for now, we're just going to practice Jamboard. So if you could go in the chat and open this up. And I'll pull mine over here. So this is what we should see. We should see a bunch of people populating this. Great, this is exciting. Okay, now we're gonna practice Jamboard, but not just for the fun of practicing Jamboard, okay? But so for some content, we're gonna do some participant-generated content here. What are some other topics from your own curricula? Whoops, be careful, you can't move my, don't move my prompt. Okay, what are some other topics that you can think of where you could use learner-generated content just as I did, just to do exactly what I did? And actually, you can do this set of steps for any level. You just give more language, you give more complex language frames, they do graphs, they can do the same steps. So you can either use a sticky note, look here, everybody. If I hit here, I'm gonna get to do a sticky note. I write in my sticky note and then I post it. I see we've already, okay, you can do a text box, but sticky notes are pretty. Let's get some sticky notes because they're nice and colorful. If you were working with your students or you were inspired to share a photograph, you could upload a photograph, or you could also, I think you could probably, I wonder if you can do, if it has to be from your, yeah, you could get a photo from Google Image too. They could upload a photo from Google Images. So when you're talking about media, okay. Okay, so for media, I could imagine like what, I'm curious, I'd love to hear more about that one. Like if you were doing the survey, like what media do you use? Where do you find your news? Like how, where do you get your information? Do you read newspaper? Do you go to websites? Do you listen to the radio, for example, right? Daily routines, pre and post COVID. Yes, yes, yes. Actually, one of my student teachers was doing her practicum, and they were assigned simple future as the was the topic, and they're working on grammar. And so she built her whole lesson. Thank you for sharing. So this could be on environmental issues, right? Right. She did her whole lesson on what's the first thing you'll do when shelter in place ends, because we were in the middle of shelter in place last spring, which I wouldn't imagine we might do again, where there was a curfew and you couldn't go anywhere and you had to wear masks. I mean, you still do, but good. Feelings about learning online, sure, good. Oh, I love that beautiful photograph. Is that in Costa Rica, the waterfall? Does anybody know? Okay, great. But isn't this fun? I wanted to give you a chance to play around with this particular tool because it is so flexible. Now, everybody, let's do this together. It's going to be tricky with so many people. Which topics might be really good for beginners and which topics might be more for advanced level? And you'll see that we can move these around. You could do categorizing. So you can have learners, if you're learning about a topic, you could have students categorize. We can circle. Great. We could put check marks. How about, let's do this, everybody. Take the pen, get a pen, and choose a color, and put a check mark next to 3 of the topics you have talked about in your class with your learners that they've enjoyed. Okay? All right. Now imagine if you were doing this in an English class, you could have learners respond to prompts and have them do checkoffs, have them do circling. So it's a highly flexible tool. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. So you can use it for quick assessments, quick formative assessments during class as well. This is great. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we're gonna stop the Jamboard. Now, what I am gonna ask you though, if a 5 is very likely to try it, okay, very likely to try this for a purpose, not just because it's fun, but it has a good instructional purpose. It could add to the learning. It could add to the learning outcomes. I could see using this for some really good formative assessment. A 5 is I'm very, very likely to try this. A 1 is I'm not going to, no, Betsy, this will not work. If you could put a number 1 through 5 in the chat right now really quickly. Let's just see how this. Got a couple 5s. Okay. 5, 5, 5s. Good. That's great. That's great. And again, if we were in a group session together, we'd talk about why and how. Again, don't ever use technology just because it's fun. Use it because it could have an instructional purpose. And again, we've now generated a list of ideas of content we could use just as learners developed ideas of the content they might use. Okay. Nice class. Thank you. All right. So, oh, and I have to clear my board. Just a sec. I've got to clear the board. There we go. I don't know. We'll see what happens when I go to the next slide. Thought I just cleared everything. Clear the bar. Okay. All right. Just give me a second.
I think people were writing with the annotations in Zoom.
Okay, cool.
I cleared them off.
Yes. Oh, so yes. So thank you though for mentioning that, Mark, because you could use annotations in Zoom on a whiteboard in Zoom for the same purpose, right? Right. And I think it functions very much in the same way. Right. Thank you. All right. So we're going to do one more example. Okay. Oops. I think I hit my one extra button here. Okay, so this is the example I shared. If some of you were with us this summer, I don't know if you were, but this is an example from something I did this summer on the idea of hit the ground running, and which is all about really having rigorous instruction, topics that really matter for your students. Now, because my own background is in working with adult learners, I do know that the topics we've talked about, at least, well, the first example the food truck, that topic was clearly for, secondary to adult, or, adult, university or adult. But I hope by generating our ideas of the different topics you could use, you could picture how you could simplify that and make it a topic that's interesting to kids, like a class you want to take over the summer, a camp you want to visit. I think the second example is clearly something with the right visuals and images. You could use that at any age level, I believe. Do you agree? I mean, it's not really dependent on, you don't have to use that with secondary or adult. This particular example is definitely secondary, adult, university level. So, but those of you teaching younger learners, I want you to think of what I say, be thinking about how does that apply to the topics I do teach, okay? So you're using shorter text, you're doing different content, but the principles of differentiation that I'm going to share really do apply, okay? All right, so this is a unit that my colleague, Laura Porter in Massachusetts, and I, she taught portions of this unit with her students in Massachusetts, and then we developed this together when working with some teachers, and it's on the theme of identifying inequities during the pandemic. So the students have to synthesize information from multiple sources, identify the inequities, and propose solutions to some problems, okay? So the learners in this context, and I think if we think back to our poll at the beginning, they had varying literacy and oral proficiency levels. They had varying levels of comfort with the digital tools. They had varying access to the tools, just like we said, and then varying experiences during the pandemic. So some people, have a lot of people they're isolated from in their families. Some have, there are elderly people alive in their family that they're not able to see, some not. Some of them, many people are losing jobs because of the pandemic. Or don't forget, people are having to learn while their kids are at home. Like I said earlier, their kids are learning, doing school online at home. They're trying to learn English, and they might be working as well. So they're having their own experiences that are very different. Okay, but let's take a look at these images, and this is from the United States. Looking at these images, who's most affected by the pandemic? And let's just answer that first part. You don't have to answer both parts, but in the chat, please just note, what do you notice? Who is most affected based on the pictures that you see here? Let's just see a few ideas in the chat. Healthcare workers, right? Who else? Homeless, the elderly, okay. Yeah, so everybody's affected in their own way, right? I think that these images show small business owners, these show people who are particularly vulnerable. Here we are, we're sitting at our computers, we might be working from home, we aren't at risk, we're not a so-called essential worker who has to be out, like the woman on the top right. We're not, if we're not in healthcare, we're not in the face of some of the dangers, right? So the idea here is to think about the inequities and who is most impacted, the effects that's having on people's lives, okay? I think the pandemic is in different parts of the world, it's happening differently. I think in the United States, it's really revealing a lot of the inequities in terms of economic justice, health justice, racial justice. So I think there's just so much you can talk about around this topic. Now, as far as our topic of today, differentiation by design, anytime you want to enter into a deep, meaty topic like this, okay? I know that we often use an image. Sure, we start in a textbook, you'll see a picture and students look at the picture. But I think we underestimate the power of that in terms of how it appeals to different types of learners for entering into a topic. If you think about it, these are texts in a sense. An image is a form of text. So we could start to say, well, how and why people are more vulnerable based on the evidence in the text. The woman, the elderly lady, she looks really lonely. She looks really sad, so she must feel really isolated. The woman on the top right, I mean, that's her job, and she probably has no choice if she needs to make a living, and stores have been told to stay open because they're essential businesses. So we want to start, making a claim and then supporting it with evidence in these texts. So that in itself relates to our idea of multi-level teaching and differentiation. So it's multimodal. We're using different modalities to access the topic. We're also saying to students, now today, because there are a lot of us here with 82 people, I did not do the open your mic and share, but in your regular class, students could open mic and speak if they'd like. They can answer in the chat box. They also, if you wanted, if students aren't as quick to write or type, you could make statements and just have them do a thumbs up or a thumbs down if the statement is true or false based on what we see in the images. So that's our way to enter into the topic. Next, I ask the students to go into breakout rooms to share their thoughts on what's the reason, why are those people most affected? Now, I think more than ever, when we're doing group work in this current online environment, it's more critical than ever that we create breakout rooms with roles, determining roles. If we're doing a discussion in a face-to-face class, again, we can kind of read the students and see how they're doing. But if you're sending them off to a breakout room, you're leaving them to their own devices, and they probably do a splendid job, but having a timekeeper, a facilitator, and then a synthesizer and who's a reporter who's going to come back to the group to share, I think it's going to make that time together more productive. Always have a clear time frame that you've assigned them and giving them these roles. These roles can vary depending on the strengths of your students. Again, that's the differentiation piece here. Okay, maybe you have the student who tends to dominate a lot, then make them the facilitator because it's their job to make sure everybody else has a chance to talk. Or maybe you have a student who's really, they're really quick at taking notes. So maybe they're going to be the synthesizer taking notes to be ready to be the reporter. Okay, now they're going to take a look at some headlines from articles on one of the themes from the original photo. So looking closely at the elderly as a theme, they're going to look at 3 different articles, but not everybody's going to look at all 3. We're going to explore 3 different topics. And the first step is, what do you think will be talked about? What do you think will be in these articles? For example, what do you think might happen to the nuclear family? What does that have to do with coronavirus? Or what might be some reasons for isolation with that second one? And what might the article tell us about reasons why the seniors are hit so hard? So here again, I would place learners in those breakout rooms again, give them a chance to make some predictions, because we know that that's a really important reading strategy, but especially in a multi-level class. And by doing it collaboratively, the peer support provides that scaffold as well, okay? So their idea here is they're going to anticipate topics that are going to be addressed in 3 articles. Okay, now, I don't know if you're talking about this a lot in your parts of the world. I know we have people from many different places, but here in the United States, especially in high school and in adult education, we talk a lot about doing very close reading. And you want to have really good close reading questions. And they're questions that really get the students to understand and make inferences and understand the article deeply. And that is great. That is great. Doing that during class time, when classes are actually quite multi-level, I think sometimes there are some better ways we can use our in-class time, and then we can assign the close reading for homework. So the idea here is that we're going to assign 3 different articles to different groups. Each group is assigned one of the topics. They're not going to read really closely yet. They're going to read to, first of all, confirm the predictions they just made as a team, and only read to identify some of the key problems addressed. That's their task. So as a team, in breakout session 1, learners in group A will be working with their article, Seniors' Health at Significant Risk Due to Isolation and Loneliness, and they're going to identify, and in a shared Google Doc, or you could use Google Slides, they're going to populate that as a team with the issues addressed in their reading. Team B will be in a different breakout room with their reading, and Team C in a different one, okay? In my handout, I have the steps for this example included as well, and I have the links to those articles. honestly, at this stage, I think you'd want to get, whatever's current to your context. In an English medium newspaper that's about your part of the world, you could do the same set of steps, exactly the same set of steps that I've done. Okay. All right. Now, learners then, this groups of learners in their same breakout team, in their same group, they're going to go to breakout room 2. Now, during breakout room 1, we have an example here from article A, seniors' health at significant risk. So the first group found these issues, that family members can't visit anymore, the elderly don't have technology for communicating, and even if they're living in their home, they're separated from their loved ones. Those were the issues that they found through their quick read, kind of working collaboratively as a support to get into the topic. And now during breakout session 2, okay, they're going to then propose solutions to the problems, to all of the problems generated as a whole class. So maybe we could use WhatsApp, or maybe we could see if someone at the center could help them out and teach them how to use some technology. Or maybe we could make some art and stand outside the window or play music by the window. So the students are doing a problem solution activity using the content that they gleaned from the articles for now. So now imagine when they're assigned either for homework or in the next class, let's imagine then you are going to read the article very closely and read it for more detail. Just think of how much better prepared everybody will be for entering into a more complex reading. I think we sometimes far too often, we do pre-reading. Yes, we anticipate ideas. We might pre-teach vocabulary, but sometimes we take people into a longer, more complex text a little too quickly. So in the spirit of differentiation, these are some steps we can take. The other thing we can do is then give them the language frames they need in order to talk about the problem solutions. So this could either be a mini lesson that we give to everybody, or maybe you visit breakout rooms and you notice some students are struggling, you can send these language frames in a chat privately to a student who's struggling. So to lessen isolation of the elderly, families should bring art outside the windows, for example. Okay. All right. Now, the next part is products. And so for products, we could write a summary. And some students could do that just free, or some could be given paragraph frames. Okay, those paragraph frames we talked about, where you give them the structure of the text and they fill in part of the information. I showed you that one earlier. It was very, very, very short for the interview. When you're doing longer academic writing, the paragraph frame could be more complex. And I'm happy to share some more resources and references for that later. They could record a short podcast, have them create a short podcast. That's really, everybody knows how to do a recording on their phone. They could prepare ahead of time, or they could do a mock radio show that they record as a podcast. So imagine that one person's the commentator and they're going to create some questions. Why are the elderly more affected than other people? What's going to happen to the nuclear family? So they're going to create questions that they have enough information from the pre-reading and from what they gathered from the problem solution task that now they can use evidence from the text to support the claims and do a mock radio show. So again, the steps I just showed you, they could be used with any topic. Okay, you could use one of the images at the beginning of other people affected by the pandemic, or you could do this for a lesson on the environment. You could do this on all sorts of those topics that you have on the Jamboard as well, right? So just to recap this one before we go to our breakout rooms for a workshop is we had different levels of, leveled text. Now, in my case, those articles, you'll see when you go to them later, if you'd like, some are shorter than others, and they're not as complex as others. Different types, we had the images, you could also bring in video clips or audio. Maybe you found a podcast on the same topic. You could have different topics based on student interest and have a lot of visual input. And then you notice that for my process, for the teaching process, we used verbal and nonverbal responses. The jigsaw meaning that each group had a different article. They populated the chart independent of one another. And then that chart brought the whole pieces of the puzzle together. That's a jigsaw. Jigsaw can also be different parts of one reading. Each group reads a different part, but it can also be different readings, especially with intermediate to advanced learners, different readings on the same topic. I offered the idea of giving them roles in the breakout room based on strengths, giving them sentence and paragraph frames as scaffolds. And then finally, they could do different types of products at the end. They're going to summarize the ideas, what are the problems and what are some possible solutions for helping the elderly during a pandemic. They could do a presentation, they could do posters, podcasts, or they could do a written summary. That's still okay. All right. So you notice we used a lot of different tools that I think are supportive of differentiation, like the breakout rooms with roles, or sharing Google Docs or slides, sharing our screens. All of these are tools that we're commonly using right now, but I've highlighted the ones that I think, that I've shown that tie into the idea of differentiation. Okay, so now Mark is going to place you into some breakout rooms for a short workshop. We're going to have about close to 15 minutes. And you'll see it's on your handout, page 6. We can also put this in the chat, Mark. Why don't we copy and paste this in the chat? Let's see, can I?
Sure.
Let's see, I'm gonna have to escape this for a moment, aren't I?
I got it here, so let me just make sure I'm sharing it with everybody.
Okay, you got it? Okay, never mind. Okay, I'll go back. You got it?
We're going to be in groups of 4 or 5. So let's make sure we, unmute ourselves and take advantage of this time to interact with other participants. So,
I just want to make sure the task is clear. So considering the learners that you serve, where do you see the greatest need for differentiation? Is it the content? Is it the process? Is it the products? Okay, because again, I don't expect that you could do all 3 at all in every lesson, and you maybe don't need to, right? And then what was an inspiration you had from today for applying any one of these dimensions to your class? And so what would seem easiest or challenging? These are a lot of questions to talk about for 15 minutes. These are the same questions for our community of practice discussion. So just like a pre-write, okay, I purposefully am giving you the same questions to contemplate and to share out here as you'll have the chance to explore more deeply in the weeks ahead. Okay, so any questions about the task? Otherwise, yes, like Mark said, be sure to introduce yourselves, put your cameras on, and we'll bring you back in about 13 minutes, 13 minutes or so. We'll have 5 minutes for questions. All right.
All right, let's go.
Have fun.
All right, we're all back now.
Okay, so I think because of time, we're not going to have you report out an inspiration or challenge, but you can use the community of practice to do that, right? So if you could please join that. And I will talk to Mark and Lily about how to join that with you as well. Just a few things. There are a couple of books that you might want, if you're interested in more about the topic. There's the Differentiated Classroom by Tomlinson. And then Jill Bell has this great book about teaching multi-level classes in ESL. This one is focused more K-12, kindergarten through, primary and secondary. This one is more adult education. And then I have the new edition of my book that Mark mentioned at the beginning, and I have a fairly large section on differentiation and on multi-level teaching and suggestions and ideas for teaching online. Again, as we close, if you have questions, we still have about 3 minutes. You can either open your mic or put that in the chat. If anybody has a burning question, I think we have, time for a couple questions. We have about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, so if you could write either your question in the chat or at least just say, hey, I want to say something, and we'll find you and make sure we can open your mic.
Sure. There's my book. Yeah, so we will share the PowerPoint, right, Mark? I was going to make it into I would like to make it into a PDF without all my notes.
I did
and
it.
Also,
yeah.
It's a small. Oh, you already did, right?
Yeah.
So
ready
do you
to
want
go.
to? Yeah. Do you want to share that link then in the chat?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're sharing all kinds of links. And so at the same time, I saw that Lee has a question. Lee from Oregon. So let me just find her and allow her to unmute herself. Okay, go right ahead, Lee.
Hello. Thank you for this workshop today. It's been great.
Thank you.
My question is, I'm curious as the time frame of this type of structure. When we're looking at content, process, and production or product. So are we looking at a week's time or?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah. Go
There's
ahead.
2 parts, and the other is when you are proposing this like content, how do you also integrate like the vocabulary in each step? I think there's always vocabulary that's missing, right?
I know, exactly. Because if you choose different content for different students, or if they select different content, there's, it's kind of, if they select it themselves, then it's going to be really on them, maybe in a task where they have a coding system where they only circle words that are really getting in their way of understanding. We don't want to get them bogged down in trying to understand every single word, obviously. If you have a shared theme and you've selected a few for them to choose from, you could identify some key vocabulary that's really essential, right? So that's but it is harder to anticipate when you have something like the 3 articles that I demonstrated. So I would look for those kind of key terms that cross that might be relevant for everybody, that are really going to serve to also help them make predictions about the text and the topic and the themes, right? Right. But to your other question, I think it really depends. Like in that beginning level lesson, that might be something you do over 2 days. Okay. Where you gather the information and then you use that to do the 1 question survey. And by the end of that 2-hour lesson, you'll then create the graph, and that's your product. However, on the lesson about creating a summary report, that might be 3 or 4 lessons over the course of a week that you've worked towards. So the 3 steps aren't like the beginning, middle, end, they're ongoing, right? And also think of product also as those ongoing assessments. So in one of the groups, I was just saying that, like, did you notice how many times I had you write a response in the chat quickly? Or, well, those were short formative assessments. And I think we can do those all the time. Or even an exit ticket where you have a prompt and then you have the students just either write or speak or say something as they leave the room as a quick assessment. Those are also sorts of products in a way, right? So we can vary those. But those are great questions, Lee. Do you also teach in adult education or at a college level?
Yes, well, adult education, yes. I'm a graduate student right now, so also college level, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think we did go over time, but my email is is it still on my final slide? Oh, yes, it's on the final slide. And I really genuinely mean it when I tell you that I welcome questions. I enjoy getting those questions from you afterwards. I appreciate the feedback I'm seeing in the chat as well. So I just want to thank you for taking time at the end of a busy week. I know it's a stressful time for all of us with the extra demands we have on our lives, teaching differently. I really enjoyed working with you, and I hope you had some good takeaways. So thank you all so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Betsy. We really appreciate you coming back to join us with your session today. And so please, everyone who does have their camera on, can you show some love, virtual applause for Betsy?
You're so kind.
So this is great. Betsy's was our final PD Talk of the year. It's been a really exciting and challenging year for everyone.
Yeah, it has been.
We're going to get started again next year in February with more PD Talks. So